They say history never repeats, but power often tries to copy what looks easy. At dawn, on the 3rd of January 2026, US forces flew into Caracas. Hours later, Nicolás Maduro was gone. No invasion, no shock and awe, just precision, control, speed. Within days, a dangerous question spread quietly, then loudly. If Washington could do this in Venezuela, could Beijing do the same to Taiwan? On Chinese social media, some called it a shortcut, a surgical strike, a clean solution to a hard problem. But that question misunderstands what really happened, and more importantly, where it happened. Venezuela was hollowed out, its system decayed from within. Taiwan is not. What looks like a blueprint is, in fact, a mirage, and copying it could be catastrophic. If you want to understand why decapitation works in one place and fails in another, stay with me. Because to grasp the future of Taiwan, we first need to understand the illusion of easy power. And that story begins with context. The real question is not whether China wants to copy the operation. It is whether the operation itself is being read correctly. What happened in Caracas was not a single raid. It was the final move in a long sequence. Total dominance across air, sea, cyber, information, and intelligence before a single soldier landed. A regime already weakened by years of collapse. A state hollowed from the inside. Many observers reduce this to tactics. Special forces, speed, leadership capture. That is a mistake. This was about systems, not individuals. About how power flows through institutions. About whether removing one person causes everything else to fall apart. Taiwan sits at the center of this misunderstanding. It is not governed by fear of one leader's fall. It is governed by law, process, and continuity. So when people ask whether Caracas can be replayed in Taipei, they are asking the wrong question. The real issue is friction and how different political systems absorb shock. To see that clearly, we need to step back and look at how these two environments were shaped long before January 2026. Long before helicopters lifted off in Caracas, the outcome was already baked in. Venezuela did not collapse overnight. It eroded year after year of economic failure, sanctions pressure, elite distrust, security forces that no longer trusted the state or each other. Power became personal. Loyalty replaced institutions. And once loyalty cracked, the system followed. That is the environment where decapitation works. Not because it is dramatic, but because there is nothing left underneath. Taiwan emerged from a different history. Decades of institutional building, peaceful transfers of power, a professional military embedded in society, not standing above it. Economic success reinforced legitimacy. Elections reinforced continuity. Civil society reinforced resilience. In Taiwan, authority does not flow downward from one person. It circulates through courts, legislatures, ministries, and media. Remove one node, and the system reroutes. This difference is not ideological. It is mechanical. And when shock arrives, systems built on redundancy bend. Systems built on fear shatter. That distinction sets the stage for the first real stress test. The first real stress test is decapitation itself. On paper, it looks decisive. Remove the leader, create confusion, force surrender. That logic worked in Caracas because the regime was already brittle. Maduro was not just a president. He was the keystone holding a failing structure together. Once he was gone, there was no clear center of gravity left to defend. Taiwan is designed to survive that moment. If a president disappears, the system does not freeze. Succession is automatic. Authority transfers legally. Orders still flow. The military still answers to civilian control. This is not theory. It is drilled, practiced, institutionalized. Decapitation succeeds only when it creates paralysis. In Taiwan, it would likely create anger, mobilization, unity. That is the paradox Beijing faces. The very act meant to break resistance could harden it. This is why copying tactics without understanding context is dangerous. Power does not collapse on cue. It collapses when legitimacy is already gone. If you're finding this analysis useful, take a moment to engage with it, because the next layer goes deeper. What really matters is the machinery beneath the surface. And that's where things get uncomfortable. What sits beneath every successful operation is a hidden machine. In Caracas, that machine was already compromised. Intelligence networks were penetrated, communications were mapped, decision loops were slow, centralized, and brittle. The United States didn't overpower the system. It entered it quietly, patiently, until control was total. That level of integration is rare. It requires years of joint operations, real combat experience, trust between services, decentralized command that still moves as one. This is where the illusion breaks. China has invested heavily in hardware, missiles, ships, satellites, but hardware is only the surface. What matters is coordination under pressure, independent decision-making at the edge, seamless fusion of intelligence, cyber, electronic warfare, and special operations. That is not built overnight. It is learned through failure, often painful failure. Taiwan understands this vulnerability. That is why it has spent years hardening its nervous system, protecting leadership, dispersing command, practicing continuity. So while Caracas revealed American capability, it also exposed the difficulty of replication. The machine is not for sale, and it does not transfer well across systems. Which brings us to the next escalation point. What happens when precision alone is no longer enough? When precision stops delivering results, escalation begins. This is the second crisis point, and it is far more dangerous. If a decapitation strike fails, there is no clean reset. Only momentum and pressure to do more. For Beijing, that moment would arrive fast. A failed or incomplete strike would not silence Taiwan. It would alert it, mobilize it, trigger contingency plans already written for this exact scenario. Air defenses tighten, command disperse, the political center hardens. At that point, China faces a choice: pull back and absorb humiliation, or push forward into something much larger. Precision gives way to volume. Surgical intent gives way to coercion. Missiles replace operators. This is where risk compounds. Every additional strike widens the conflict. Every escalation invites response, not just from Taiwan, but from systems watching closely across the region. What began as a calculated move becomes a strategic gamble. This is why decapitation strategies are so seductive and so dangerous. They promise speed, they hide cost. And once the line is crossed, there is no guarantee of control. What matters next is not generals or presidents, it is people. And that is where the story turns personal. This is where strategy collides with reality. With you, if you live in Taiwan, decapitation is not an abstract theory. It is a morning without certainty, a phone that won't stop buzzing, a city holding its breath. But here is the truth many analysts miss. Fear does not always paralyze societies. Sometimes it clarifies them. In democracies, shock often produces resolve. People organize, communities tighten, institutions lean on legitimacy, not force. You don't wait for orders to care about your future. You already understand what is at stake. Your vote, your voice, your way of life, that is why a strike meant to break morale could instead ignite it. History shows this pattern again and again. Pressure does not erase identity, it sharpens it. If this analysis resonates with you, share it, talk about it, because resilience begins with understanding. And while Taiwan absorbs shock differently, the consequences do not stop at its shores. What happens next ripples outward, across alliances, markets, and borders. That wider impact is impossible to ignore. The shock waves do not stop at the island. They ripple across the globe. Operation Absolute Resolve in Venezuela was watched closely in Asia. Every movement analyzed, every outcome debated. Taiwan's allies take note. Japan, the US, Australia, they all measure their own readiness. A failed decapitation would embolden some, alarm others. The balance of deterrence shifts subtly but perceptibly. Beijing watches too, learning not only what works, but what risks are unacceptable. For China, the calculus is not moral, it is operational and political. Meanwhile, the global South notices patterns. China's absences in Venezuela and Iran are noted. Its promises do not always translate into action. This shapes perceptions of its reliability far beyond Asia. Regional networks, trade routes, and diplomatic ties respond. Minor shifts cascade into major consequences, because in a connected world, no action is truly isolated. Taiwan is not alone. Its fate is intertwined with global attention and strategic awareness. And yet, the future remains uncertain. 3 possible paths are now emerging. Let's look forward. 3 possible futures for Taiwan, shaped by the lessons of Venezuela. First, the optimistic scenario. Deterrence holds. China hesitates, constrained by Taiwan's resilience, international scrutiny, and operational risk. Taiwan continues to strengthen its defenses and government continuity. Allies maintain credible support. Regional stability persists. Confidence in rule-based order grows. Second, the middle scenario. China tests boundaries. Limited strikes or coercion create tension without full-scale invasion. Taiwan responds, absorbs shocks, and maintains governance. Economic and social strain rise. Diplomatic efforts intensify. The region balances on a knife edge with constant vigilance required. Third, the worst-case scenario. China escalates recklessly. Decapitation and coercive operations collide with Taiwan's defenses. International response is fragmented. Chaos spreads with humanitarian and political consequences. Even if Taiwan survives politically, the costs are immense. This outcome underscores that force without legitimacy or preparation is unpredictable. The underlying lesson is systemic. Decapitation is not a magic formula. It succeeds only when context, timing, and fragility align. Taiwan's systems are robust, its people resilient, and its allies watchful. And yet, strategic clarity requires continuous preparation because uncertainty never sleeps. We arrive at the insight that frames everything. Operation Absolute Resolve dazzled the world. It captured a dictator. It showcased precision, speed, and U.S. military prowess. But it was context-dependent. Venezuela's decay made it possible. Taiwan is not Venezuela. Beijing may study the operation. It may dream of replicating it. But copying tactics without understanding context is perilous. Leadership removal alone will not change a system built on laws, institutions, and resilient people. For Taiwan, the message is clear. Strengthen continuity, protect leadership, and maintain vigilance. For the world, the lesson is caution. Even surgical strikes carry strategic ripple effects. And for all of us, the reminder is that power without legitimacy is fragile. If this analysis gave you insight, share it, discuss it, because understanding the machinery behind decisions is the first step in shaping your own future. And remember, history may provide templates, but context writes the rules. This is just one story. There are more to explore. Stay aware, stay informed, and prepare for the realities that lie ahead.